Hey, welcome to the Invisible Strength series, where athletes and autoimmune warriors are sharing their stories of resilience and determination navigating these tough diseases. If you're new here, I'm Karen Wagner, and I'm joined by the amazing Chris Burton. How are you doing, Chris?
It's always wonderful to be here with you, Karen. Excited to have this conversation with Cisco and share this information that we keep doing that each and every time.
I'm especially honored and thrilled to welcome Francisco Tellez. He played Division I baseball at the University of California, Riverside, and was since drafted by the Boston Red Sox, where he played 2 seasons in the minor league. Post baseball, he went on to do strength and conditioning coaching, but unfortunately, his career come to a halt with a diagnosis of lupus nephritis in 2020. But since then, he has channeled his energy into raising awareness for people with lupus, especially males, also known as the 10 percenters, which I so appreciate. I'm truly honored and excited to have you on the show, Francisco. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you all so much for the invite. It's truly an honor to be here.
It is for us as well, brother.
Francisco, before we get into your specific lupus story, can you share about yourself as a person before you became a patient?
Yeah, well, like you said, I had the opportunity to play Division I baseball, and baseball was something that I picked up at 2 years old. I got a bat and a ball, and I was at my grandmother's house, and the rest, I guess, is history. I played high school baseball all 4 years, had a little bit of adversity transitioning from my senior year to my freshman year in college. I had to have a Tommy John surgery, which is a pretty major surgery for your elbow. Just in short, it's a torn ligament that has to be replaced, and that's not easy. And it's about a 12-month recovery. So during that time, I actually went to junior college just to get some college credits going without affecting eligibility. And then I had a commitment to San Diego State University here locally. And that was honestly my dream school because my parents went there. It's right down the road. And at the time, it was coached by Tony Gwynn, who is a baseball legend.
Legend, legend.
And I remember going to Padres games as a kid and seeing him there and always wanting to play for him since he took that head coaching job. So being able to sit in the same room face to face with him was an unreal experience. Unfortunately, that fell through. So I was kind of searching on my own. And back then, they didn't have any NIL deals or anything like that. So college students having agents was not a thing. So I had to do all the legwork. Me and my dad, he helped me formulate some emails to send to college coaches. Eventually, it got to the coaches at UC Riverside, and the head coach actually came down. They were playing at the University of San Diego. And I met with him and just hit in front of him in a batting cage. And he said, we don't have any scholarships available, but you're a preferred walk on and you have a spot on the team. So from there, my performance greatly impacted, I guess, the amount of scholarship that I would have going forward. So I basically had my spot, but I had to earn, I guess, my keep. And I took that as an opportunity to pay back my parents really because, they were helping me through school. So how much can I grind? How well can I do not only in school, but also in athletics to help my parents out as much as possible? So I was awarded a scholarship. I spent 2 years there, which is pretty unique, I guess, in a sense, because usually you only spend 2 years at a junior college. But going to the 4 year, I had the opportunity to get drafted my sophomore year just because of my age. So I had the opportunity to do that, was drafted by the Boston Red Sox in 2014, immediately took it, and it was a blast. After I finished playing, I knew I was ready to go back to school. And that's something that I had set my sights on before I even was drafted is no matter what, I'm going to finish school. And I initially was going to school to be in law enforcement because that's what my father did, his father did. So I wanted to keep it kind of going. And
Tradition going.
oh yeah, yeah. But there was a lot of issues that happened around that time that I was like, you know what? I don't know that I want a target on my back. And, the more that I talked to my dad about it, he's like, as much as I would love to see it, I don't want you to become a law enforcement officer just because of all the struggles and hardships that he went through. So I changed my sights to what I knew best, and that was athletics. What can I do off the field to help these athletes going forward? Because that's always my view of things, is even though I'm done, I'm not going to try to relive it through vicariously through kids or anything like that. It's how can I share my knowledge and what I see was missing when I was coming up. How can I pass that on to the next generation of athletes? And so I got my degree in kinesiology, graduated in 2019 from the University of Texas at Tyler, and went on to be a strength and conditioning coach. And I was blessed to have that opportunity as well. It started off as an internship for graduation requirements. And like not even a month into that internship, they said, "Hey, we're low on coaching. We need somebody to fill in for the staff. You're going to be our part-time performance coach." And it kind of just took off from there. I was responsible for in-house student athlete training, and I was the one traveling around DFW to help um, athletes who reached out for our services. I think, namely, the coolest opportunity I had, just because I was a baseball background, it was easy for me to do baseball stuff. But I was a coach for 2 months for the South Grand Prairie girls basketball team, and they're a big deal in Dallas Fort Worth. And the year that we worked with them, I worked on uh, basically injury prevention in the preseason. They went the whole year, won the state championship, didn't have a single injury, and it was so fulfilling
Of
that
course.
I was able to help them get play at their peak performance for the entire season.
Yeah.
Don't care about the accolades, the name drops, anything like that. These
Sure.
women were able to do what they did because of the hard work that they put in. Had nothing to do with what I did. So, that was awesome. That was humbling.
Mhm.
Just a great experience, and I wanted more. So, I took on a club baseball team in Texas as well. Had 100 plus kids 3 to 4 days a week. It was rowdy, but it was a good time. And then, COVID hit, and Karen, much like you, I started showing signs and symptoms after we went virtual with everything. We did virtual workouts from our apartment over Zoom.
Yeah.
That was going really well. And then by June of 2020, that's when I started to show signs and symptoms, and I had no idea what was going on with my body. But in a snapshot, yeah, I loved strength and conditioning. I loved watching these kids and student athletes be able to do what they're do, not only in the classroom, but on the field, getting to tap into that thing that I once had, chasing a dream, but understanding and teaching these kids, like, this is a dream, but all the work is going to come from you. Doesn't matter what coach you hire, doesn't matter how much money you spend, anything like that. It's going to come from within you. And you got to give it all you got. And at the end of the day, whatever happens, happens. So, yeah.
Absolutely. No, I love that story, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Because so many things jump to mind from what you said, but just really thinking about, I saw a parallel between your story and mine in that while you were diagnosed was when you were working with kids, and I used to be a school teacher as well, and so
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
thinking about just the energy of that, and like with you doing club baseball and just
Hmm.
this when I played baseball, nowhere near the caliber of what you're describing, by the way. But when I played baseball, I just remember having so much fun being on the team. Like I love the sport, but just the camaraderie of being on the team, traveling, and just whether you're doing your homework or just chatting, whatever it was, like you just really had a great time. Like describe for us that sense of how you began to process that I might need to shift, or like the sort of adjustments or modifications you would need as you were dealing with this new variable of lupus nephritis while you were still helping other kids and helping people pursue their dream.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I started, like I said, when everything was happening, I had no idea what was going on with my body because it all started with joint pain. It started in my hands, and as a strength and conditioning coach, I'm using that every single day. Then it started with bigger joints like my hips, shoulders, and knees were the first ones to show. And given my line of work, I was thinking to myself, what physiologically, what could this be? And the first thing I thought was you went from lifting every day, on your feet every day, coaching, driving around town, and then you're all of a sudden sedentary, limited to 3 to 4 classes, which is 3 to 4 hours a day in your apartment or, in your friend's garage. Did a couple there. That was really fun. But I thought it was just that lifestyle change. So I had to get moving more. I had to do more things and I wasn't able to. So in order to continue to do my job sufficiently, my friend, and he was our intern at the time, Liam, he invited me over to his parents' house there in the local area. So we did the workouts from his garage. And he was just an asset to have, just running those classes, just because it's like, hey man, I can't do this, this, and this today. Can you demonstrate on Zoom while I cue and coach and stuff like that so they can get a
Mm-hmm.
better understanding? And he said, yeah, man, I got you. So, I mean, from there, we built that bond and we're friends to this day.
For
He's
sure.
like a little brother to me. But yeah, just going back to your question was, once I realized I couldn't do it, I had to find somebody who could, but that didn't take me out of the equation as a coach.
Yeah.
So understanding, getting back to the roots of coaching, which is basically communication, I had to tap into that big time. And moving forward post-diagnosis, communication was so hard because I was in a place where just new territory. So communicating expectations and what I needed from other people, I didn't know how to do very well because I didn't even know what I needed.
That's so
And
real.
I was so lost. So all of it came out as frustration, anger, sadness, depression. Um, and then understanding, after uh, I reached out for therapeutic help, I went to cognitive behavioral therapy for about 3 years. Just reaching and tapping into that resource was probably one of the best things that I could have done, because it helped me realize that I still had the power, specifically in my words, and I could convey to other people not only what's happening to me, but as the months and years went on, I understood kind of what my body needed. I understood what I needed mentally as well, and what I needed from my support group. So being able to communicate that effectively has changed everything, really. Just because, not everybody is going to have answers for you, but the least you can do is communicate, saying, hey, this is what I'm going through. This is what I think I need from you. And just kind of going from there. Opening up that communication channel was big. And, just like I said, being new territory, I had no idea that the coaching side, the communication portion, would translate into the life that I have now. But it was a game changer.
Question. Thank you for sharing that.
Cisco, I would imagine that given that COVID had just happened, were you questioning that it was COVID, and did it take you a long time to get a diagnosis?
Yeah. So to touch on reaching out for help and stuff like that, after my elbow surgery, that was really just a moment in time where my perspective shifted again, where adversity made its first big impact in my life with being out for 12 months. Because usually it was just, a sprain something or tweak this, tweak that, and I need a couple of weeks of rest and then I'm back to it.
Ice
That
it and move on.
Right.
exactly, ibuprofen, things like that. So I remember reading Drew Brees' book, Coming Back Stronger, telling
Mm.
his story about how with the San Diego Chargers, he shredded his shoulder, the nights he spent sleeping on the recliner, his recovery, changing his diet and his food, and then, still being able to go on with another team and complete his Hall of Fame career like he did. So that's a little bit about the adversity, and just kind of, it's always been adapt and overcome. I don't know if I learned that in high school or my college coaches, but two things was adapt and overcome and embrace the suck.
Mm.
Sometimes you just got to go through it to get out the other side. And, it doesn't matter how you do it, what you're doing. It's going to be nose in the dirt, just grind through it, and you're going to make it. And now after the diagnosis, it's been a lot more challenging just because it varies day to day, but it's still the same thing, adapt and overcome and embrace the suck. So that was a little bit about that. Going back to the second part of the question, during COVID, I absolutely thought it had to do something with COVID just because just the nature of how things were in the country. Everything was shut down. We couldn't go outside. We couldn't go to the store. We couldn't, it was just a wild time. So, of course, I thought, this is the big thing right now. And maybe it got to me. So I went to get tested multiple times. They all came back negative. And then from the joint pain started everything else, the chills, the fevers, things like that. And then specifically one day, I remember watching this funny TikTok because TikTok was probably at the peak during COVID. So
It was on fire.
yeah. Yeah. So I watched this funny video on the couch and I remember trying to laugh, and it was probably one of the most painful things that I experienced because I couldn't breathe.
Right.
So I was like, oh my gosh, like now is it, and now am I going to go back and get tested because I can't breathe very well?
Right.
Is this COVID? And, test after test after test was negative. So eventually got to the point where they started taking imaging of my chest and stuff like that. And that's when they found the fluid around my heart, which was causing AFib issues and just a lot of chest pain with any sort of position changes. They saw the fluid. At the time, they thought it was in my lungs, so they thought I had pneumonia. But it turns out that I had fluid around my lung, which is called pleural effusion. Eventually, things escalated to the point where my mom's birthday, August 8th, that was my first true hospital stay. I was bouncing in and out of a local ER in Texas just because the way that they have it there, you're allowed to have standalone ERs not associated with a hospital. And the athlete in me kind of treated it almost like when you're playing hurt, you don't really want to go to the head coach and say, hey, I have this thing going on. You want to go to the athletic trainer and say, hey, help me get through this. Do whatever you can to make sure that I'm on the field today, tomorrow, and the next day. So I kind of treated it like that. And I didn't want to be admitted to a hospital. I didn't want to be exposed to all of the COVID and everything that was happening. Finally, it got to the point they said, we can't help you anymore. You have to go to a hospital. August 8th is always going to stick out to me, not only because it was my mom's birthday, but I was in the ER. My mom flew out from California, and my girlfriend at the time, now fiance, went to go pick her up from the airport, come back. It was probably a span of like 6 hours, honestly. Excuse me. That was probably one of two of the most traumatic experiences that I had. My blood pressure just started tanking. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I couldn't move because I was in pain. And sure enough, within a matter of seconds, I remember they coded me even though I was conscious, but I had a swarm of nurses and one doctor come in. They PICC lined my right arm. They mainlined my my femur, and they put me on I think it's called a BiPAP, the one that goes over your mouth. It's not a ventilator, but it's like just a mask apparatus that helps you breathe a little bit better. And they started talking about heart failure and all that stuff. And I was just blown away just because I was fully conscious. You think
Right.
something serious like that, you're either unconscious or just barely alive. And I just remember my mom and my girlfriend out in the parking lot. They couldn't come in because of COVID restrictions. And I had just this swarm of team of doctors around me. And that was probably the first time in a long time that's probably the only time at that time that I didn't know if I was going to get to see them again. And they were just in the parking lot. And I said, I was telling myself, I was talking to God, I am a Christian. And I was just like, this can't happen like this, right? Like this, there's no way it ends like this. Me here, my family right outside. There's no way. And thankfully, they stabilized me. They took me up to ICU and all of that stuff, and eventually got to the point where they said, we need to drain what's causing the problem right now around your heart. So we did that. Of course, it ended up coming back. And that's when I had a procedure done, a pericardial window to alleviate that fluid. And I haven't had an issue since, thankfully. But yeah, it was pretty trying times, to say the least. COVID made a lot of things hard. And then just with diagnosis, that's the first thing they always tested me for, was COVID. So just because of the time that we were in, I feel like their sites were so focused on COVID. Like, we need to make sure it's not COVID first before anything else. And then after they made sure it wasn't COVID, I felt just as lost as I feel like the doctors did at the time of, well, if he's got fluid in his lung, it's pneumonia, but it's not around his lung, or it's not in his lung, it's around, he's got this around his heart. We have no idea what's going on. But my first day in the ICU, I had a nephrologist come and talk to me because I had some previous kidney stuff. Membranous nephropathy is what it's called. So I had a lot of protein leaking in my urine and stuff like
Hmm.
that, a lot of swelling in my legs. She was the first person and the only person at that time to say, have you been tested for lupus before? So I owe a great deal of gratitude to Dr. Gwynn at the Dallas Renal Group in Texas. Literally, it felt like she stuck her neck out there, because after doing the research on the disease, only 10% of lupus patients are men. And, just kind of looking back, she took a risk, and she took what she knew and said, this could possibly be it. And sure enough, after a kidney biopsy, lupus nephritis, class 4 and class 5. So it was it was a journey to get there, but luckily my journey, I feel like, was a lot shorter than a lot of the other people that I talked to. I was showing symptoms in June, first major hospital stay in August, and then I got my diagnosis the first week of September, all in the same year. And that what I've talked to most people about, men and women, is that it took them years to figure out what was going
Hmm.
on. So consider myself lucky in that sense that they were able to find it so quickly, but it kind of put into perspective the severity of things that were happening for me to get my diagnosis in about 4 months.
Absolutely. And just thinking about what sorts of, as you mentioned, it's like just 10% of the population of those who have lupus are men. What kind of like misconceptions did you feel like you experienced either during the diagnosis process, or as you're trying to explain this to everyone around you? Like, it's one of those things where people don't think about a disease until it's affecting them or someone they know. So when people heard that this, otherwise very healthy person actually had lupus, like what were the sort of conceptions or misconceptions that came with it?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that I still face to this day is the fact that a lot of people with lupus and autoimmune diseases don't necessarily look sick. And that is, I remember coming home for the first time after home being San Diego, where, I came out to visit my parents for about a month and see everybody that was showing their support throughout my hospital stays. I vividly remember one person. This is the first time somebody saying, are you the son that was sick? Referring to, my dad's son and stuff like that. I said, yeah. And he's like, oh, well, you don't look sick. And I genuinely did not know how to respond, because that was the first time somebody had said that to me. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I had, is just because I look normal on the outside doesn't mean, my body's not hurting. I'm not going through fatigue or brain fog or anything like that. The other one that I had was centered around being a man. And I had a primary care practitioner at the time who just wanted to diagnose it as arthritis, and basically told me, this is what you need to do. Here's some steroids. Here's some arthritis medication. And when I kept having to come back and see him, he finally just said, you're a 28-year-old male, and you need to be working you need to be working, because I see a lot of men that I end up putting on disability that have issues with the mental side of things. And I fully understood that, but it's just like, I'm not asking for disability. I'm not asking for any of this. I'm just telling you that I cannot function on a day to day without being in pain, without having any issues. So what do I do about that? And then, even to this day, the answer is always go to see a rheumatologist. And even then, it still feels like an uphill battle because the disease itself is so complex. They call it the great imitator for a reason. Can't really pinpoint what's lupus, what's not until it gets to the point where I was in 2020. So just being a man dealing with this, and thankfully I have had a great resource. There's a nonprofit foundation here in San Diego called the Lupus Warriors, and it's headed by Emmett Henderson, who, yeah, you know about him, Chris?
I know him. I know him. He
Okay, yeah.
runs a support group for LFAs, and I had a chance to chat with him a couple of times. Good dude.
Yeah, yeah, he still does the monthly meetings just through his
The
little
man cave or something
organization.
like that. Is that right?
I'm not sure what he talks. Does he call it that anymore? I'm not
At
sure
one
if
point it
that's what.
was. I don't know if
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
still.
yeah. I mean, he's been doing this for years. Obviously, his battle has been decades in the making, really. And he's right now where he's to the point where he needs his second kidney transplant, and he
I did
still
see that.
can't find a donor. And yeah, even through all of that, he's still doing what he's doing with the nonprofit. He's still doing the support groups, not only with men, but he does a whole autoimmune support group as well. But he hit the nail on the head when I was talking to him for the first time, talking about how when he was diagnosed, it was known as a woman's disease. So he got the feedback of, oh, well, you have a woman's disease. And although that stigma is still not around, people don't say that nearly as much as they used to. Still, the societal view of a man still impacts how they think about you when you have the disease. And that's been challenging to say the least, because it's just like, doc, I know I, I don't want to rely on the government for assistance. I don't want to rely on any sort of disability for assistance. Thankfully, I have my family who's been very supportive, but at the end of the day, I still want to turn around and do something for my life, for myself. And I'm trying to find what that is, but it doesn't help, when it's just like, how can we get you functioning just to go back to work? Because I've tried that twice and it always ends up in a flare. Even work from home stuff, just the stress and just the mental capacity it takes every single day to just get through 8 hours. You spend the next, 5, 6 hours trying to unwind. You fall asleep and have to wake up and do it again. And then the weekend comes, and next thing you know, you're waking up at 1 or 2 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday, basically sleeping the weekend away just to recover. And then, you're back to work. So a lot like you, Karen, I didn't want the whole, 9 to 5. This is what you have to do for this chunk of your day, because the rest of my day is washed because of it. And then my weekend's gone. And it's not like, I want to go out to the club or do anything like that at this point in my life. All I want to do is be able to spend time with my family, with my loved ones, travel if I want to, or even just go out and enjoy like a hike or something like that. But when you're dedicating 40 hours a week, it's taking a toll on you physically and mentally. Those weekends become rest and recovery only. And it makes it that much harder.
I can relate to that. Excuse me. I was hospitalized truly because I had pushed myself so hard trying to make it all work, and it ended up in a life-threatening flare, and
Hmm.
it's just not worth it at times.
Yeah. 100%. Prioritizing your health, especially after a diagnosis and a life-changing event or two, is crucial. But to be quite honest, and I'm sure um, both of y'all have experienced it, at some point you feel selfish sometimes trying to prioritize your own health. You're saying no to family, you're saying no to friends, Sometimes you're even saying, no to yourself because you just need to be in bed or attached to a heating pad or something along those lines. And it's a tough mental battle to kind of get over, that you're not being selfish. You're taking care of yourself to prevent something serious from happening to you. And, that's a mental hurdle that I feel like a lot of people still struggle with, including myself at times.
Yeah, what you're saying makes me think about just the way that, and I've said this to other guests as well, but I just really think that I've never come across a lupus warrior in particular who has, their story was like, I never did much. Like I just was, had no ambition. I took it easy. I just really just kind of chilled all the
Uh-huh.
time. It really seems to be these stories of people who really are pushing themselves in their fields and in their endeavors. And I just wonder, even as we talk about the rise, the last data point I saw was something like 1 in 3 Americans currently having some sort of autoimmune disease or
Yeah.
condition. At what point do we investigate the way that we all live, like the way that we all, you know, the standard 40-hour work week that we have in this culture is not a universal thing, right? There's cultures that they say we're going to work 4 days a week. There's occupations that are like, I don't care how much time you take, just get the project done. Like all these different ways that we could make adaptations for it. Like, what if you had a chance to really craft a schedule that would work best for you and listening to your body? What would that look like, Francisco?
First and foremost, try to prioritize sleep. So it's not so much when to fall asleep, it's just when is enough sleep. When is sleep? When have I reached the required amount of sleep for my body? Not the 6 to 8 hours that everybody recommends, because some days I can sleep 4 hours and feel fine. Other days I have to sleep 12 plus hours and I'm still wiped out. Um, so centering it around that, and then time to either meditate or time in prayer, to kind of get my mind and body right. And I just kind of that take that time to really check in with my body, see kind of what's going on that day. And then third, and probably should be second or first on the list, would be enough time to be able to meal prep and do all that stuff for myself
Yeah.
as well on a daily basis, because foods have such a big impact on our bodies and inflammation. Uh, I had to cut out a lot of, I'm sure you guys have heard of it. It's all going around right now, about seed oils and stuff like that. I was on that venture about 4 or 5 years ago, and, just understanding that why is my elbow or knee, why are my joints swelling? And all I did was this today. And then it took a while to realize, well, wait a minute, maybe it's the food. Maybe something that I ate is causing some sort of reaction. And sure enough, soy sauce was one of the first things that I saw impacting my body. And then I went down the whole research rabbit hole, so to speak, about, certain oils, certain things like soy and corn, which are so heavy in the American diet. Looking at processed sugar as well. That's a big no-no right now. And if people do indulge, just in moderation, really. I mean, you understand, having the knowledge that I do now, you understand that when you allow yourself to have something with sugar or one of those oils or something like that, you understand the repercussions you might face. So you definitely don't pig out on them by any means. Um, but just allowing yourself kind of that freedom to say, you know what, I can have this every now and then. Just a little something, whether it's a dessert, one of your favorite desserts or something like that. It's just like, you know what, it's been a good X amount of months or weeks, or, you're celebrating something, whether it's an achievement or whether it's, I've gone this long without a flare, and, that's something to celebrate, but definitely not overdoing it when you choose to do that. So my ideal work schedule, like I said, would be centered around sleep, centered around taking the time to do the things that I need to do for myself. And, you know, I looked into the whole, you know, maybe start your own business. I've had a lot of people, you know, talk to me about that stuff. And it's like, yeah, well, that's great. But, you know, when you start your own business, you're not making your own hours, so to speak, because you're technically always on the clock. You always have to work. And if you miss a day, you miss 2 days, you know, if you're the only employee, or even if you have, you know, a couple other employees there, you're still out. And that, I feel like that is, it's like missing a week in high school because of illness versus missing a week in college because you're sick. That high school one, you can always catch up to. It's like, you know, just a regular standard job. You take your week of PTO, you come back, you keep doing your thing because the company as a whole is still functioning. I feel like that's even more of a challenge sometimes. So, like I said, I don't know what it is exactly, you know, where my path is going to lead as far as career, but prioritizing sleep and doing the things that I have to do to keep functioning on a daily basis are going to be at the forefront. So that could look like a, you know, 2 to 3 hour workday. That could look like a 6 hour workday. It all depends.
So thank you for sharing that vision.
Yeah.
I appreciate that because I can personally relate because before Invigorate, I started my own marketing agency. That ended up being just as maybe, if not more stressful than my corporate job. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm going to
Mhm.
put myself right back into the hospital.
Right.
However, I do want to touch on this fact that like you're at where you're at right now, you're used to pivoting, and then you just have to have not just, but you have to have the faith and the hope that you'll find your lane and it'll work out. You just might not know exactly what that looks like right now. And sometimes sitting in that unknown space, especially for me, can feel really uncomfortable. But how are you kind of navigating that?
Really tapping back into the athlete mentality, adapting and overcoming. It's a challenge to say the least, but understanding, it's going back to the whole, I guess, trust the process is a better saying. There's, oh my gosh, there's so many sayings. Being comfort, be comfortable being uncomfortable. That was one of the things that we had to, that was instilled in us in high school and college and stuff like that. And that's definitely where I am now. Is my body hurts. Fatigue has been a real challenge for the last month or so. Having all of these things come up, but understanding that not to jump to something else to try to get a quick fix or anything like that. Trusting the process and what I'm doing. Keep prioritizing sleep. Keep meal prepping and putting good fuel into your body. Continue to check in with your therapist or whoever it is that you go see for your mental health. Doing all of that stuff when your body is just dragging you down is beyond challenging because your mind is going to say, hey, you just need to chill today. While that might be true physically, mentally, that still might be the day that you need to go talk to your therapist. Or that might be the day where you need to just go outside and go for a walk because, you know, you've been a shut-in for X amount of days and you need to go get some vitamin D from the sun and just be outside. Grounding is a thing that I've been doing a lot lately. And grounding is basically going outside, finding like a natural piece of grass or sand here at the beach and just standing barefoot and just really connecting with the earth. And that seems to kind of quiet my mind. Again, it puts me in a spot where I can really get in tune with my body, figure out kind of what's going on that day, things that I might need or things that I could do differently. Just understanding that you have to trust the process and really, really look at yourself in the mirror and analyze what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, because there are some things that we all still do that can be contributing to how we feel, but we don't want to admit that it is. You know, whether it's your guilty pleasure in food, whether it's something you're doing with your lifestyle and stuff like that. I mean, I know people with autoimmune diseases and stuff like that that still drink from time to time. And, you know, surprising, you know, and then they come back and it's just like, oh man, my body, this and that. It's just like, yeah, you know, it takes a toll on you. You're not 21 years old and perfectly healthy anymore to where your body can process that. It's you're taking one drink, but you're committing maybe 1 to 2 days of recovery time now. So, I stopped drinking after my diagnosis. And yeah, I don't know if that really answered the question. I know I kind of got off on a little tangent there, but
Trust the
yeah,
process.
trust the process.
I just have to keep reminding myself that.
Absolutely. So if you had like a time machine, or if you were just speaking to another man or another person in general who was freshly diagnosed with lupus, like what words would you have given yourself, or to a young man who's trying to figure it out, or a person who's trying to figure out their diagnosis?
So, just to clarify, you're asking if I can go back to myself in 2020 after my diagnosis. First and foremost, reach out for help immediately. I was diagnosed officially in September of 2020, and it took me until October of 2021 to realize that mentally I had changed. And a lot of it was due to the trauma that I had in the hospital. After my diagnosis, I went through 6 rounds of Cytoxin, which is low dose chemotherapy for my lupus treatment, and a plethora of steroids. And then I started oral medications in January 2021 for maintenance. March of that year, I'm already interviewing for jobs just to try to get back to normal because, in my mind, that thing happened. Let's put it past us. Let's jump back into it. And I couldn't have been more wrong that, I was like, I'm ready. I have to do this just to get back to normal. And it just came up and kind of slapped me in the face when I was just like, why am I, why am I in this? It felt just like a pit that I was in mentally. I was like, why am I here? Why are certain things triggering me? Why do I want to just isolate myself in a dark room? Why do I feel like a burden to everybody around me? Why do I specifically remember sitting on the couch and my fiance was watching something, I think it might have been Grey's Anatomy or something like that. And hearing those hospital beeps for the first time after my diagnosis, I lost it. And I'm like, what is going on with me? And then when I finally reached out for help, I saw a psychiatrist first, to try to get an understanding of what was going on to see if there was any medication that could help me. Uh, Trialed and errored a few medications, and I was just like, you know what? I take so many pills on a daily basis. I don't need to keep adding more and trying new stuff. So that's when I went into cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's been more useful than any pill. Um, trying to personally for me, because everybody's different. Cognitive behavioral therapy might work for somebody. For somebody else, they might not be as receptive, but the medication is helping them do what they need to
Sure.
do. Just as long as, medication is not the long-term answer ever. There's a lot of, even though you take medication, it would be probably best to join that with some sort of other, I guess, natural therapy, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy or, for my kidneys and stuff like that and lupus, I have to take certain medications, but I can also impact how I feel on a daily basis based on the food that I eat too. So kind of doing them in joint would be the best. So if I had to tell myself or somebody that was recently diagnosed with lupus, I would say get help. Mentally, it will take a toll on you. Physically, you're used to it taking a toll on you at this point. So, just kind of bear through what you can. But if it gets to the point where it's unbearable, reach out for help. And the last thing I would probably tell him was be patient through all of this because your patience is going to get tested. You're going to easily get frustrated if you go to the doctor and they tell you nothing's wrong, but your body hurts. Misdiagnoses are frustrating as well, bearing through that, but understanding that this disease is very complex and doctors are going to try to do everything to treat the symptoms that you're having, but that may not be the answer ultimately. So patience. And then last thing would be do your research. Do a lot of reading, do a lot of research, reach out to support groups and stuff like that. It can be a great deal of help, not necessarily for treatments that worked or anything like that, but more so just for perspective and understanding. because ultimately I think you're going to gain wisdom and knowledge from that. And then you can pick and choose what you want to incorporate in your own life, just depending on what works for you. So, yeah.
I love that. I could have used that advice when I was first starting out.
Me too.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah. That's the same.
Cisco, we want to thank you so much for being so open and talking about your journey with us. What a wild, incredible ride. Any last words or anything you want to share before we kind of wrap this up?
Yeah. The wheels are spinning right now for sure. First and foremost, lupus sucks. Unfortunately, that's just the diagnosis that you have to live with. The most important thing to remember for anybody who's going through autoimmune diseases, adversity of any sort, is understanding that you're not defined by your diagnosis. You're not defined by your failures. You're not defined by the challenges that you face in life. You're defined by how you handle them. You may not be able to solve them, but you're defined by your actions when you're presented with that adversity. My adversity was lupus, and going down the rabbit hole of the things that I put into my body, what I can do to have better sleep hygiene and things to just take care of myself. That's something that takes strength, and fittingly invisible strength. And you're going to go through battles and challenges that people are not going to be able to visibly see. And that's when that invisible strength is going to kick in. Tap into it, tap into your resources, and again, trust the process. Yeah, I mean, I think I guess I can finish there. There's
Well said.
so many other
Yeah,
things
truly.
that we can go into for sure, but maybe another time. But yeah.
Well, I think we should have you back in May for Lupus Awareness Month.
That would be fun. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, I actually started my outreach. It was, I guess, in uh 2022 was when I first did my first Lupus Foundation of America walk and stuff like that. And just being able to tap in that side and embrace your diagnosis is empowering on a different level. And for me, it feels like 1 month out of the year where I can not only embrace it, but talk about it freely. Because a lot of the times when I'm talking to my friends or family and stuff like that, the main concern main thing I'm worried about is how much of a downer is this for you guys to hear what's going on, you know? But there's something about the month of May now where it feels like you just open up and everything, while as dark as it may seem at sometimes, May just feels like a time where it's like you can put a positive twist on it because you're fully embracing who you are. You're fully embracing your diagnosis, and everybody who has lupus in the month of May, I hope, feels the same way. Where that's our month. We could say whatever we want. We could do whatever we want because we're facing this challenge every single day, and for 31 days, we can just scream from the rooftops to try to find other people in our situation.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Lastly, can you tell people where they can find you on Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram. So my lupus account is at underscore men have lupus and the number 2. Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
We'll drop it in the description too. Thank you so much, Cisco. It was absolute joy to talk to you. Thanks, Chris.
Likewise.
To our Invisible Strength community, if today's episode resonated with you, please like and share it with a friend so we can reach more autoimmune warriors and allies. Thank you. Until next time, take care.